And then I'm looking at the computer, and as I'm looking at it, it stops recording. And I immediately hit record again. So we missed like half a second. But we missed half a second of when it came in the Bad Seeds song.
My guest today is audio engineer, mixer and producer extraordinaire Anna Laverty. Anna has engineered, recorded, mixed and or produced the likes of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Paul Dempsey, Dallas Frasca, Meg Mac, Kaitlin Keegan, Peep Tempel, Tina Arena, Lady Gaga, Go Get Mum and many, many others. With a very impressive portfolio that speaks for itself, Anna has established a reputation within the production community for bringing out the absolute potential of recordings. She's a staunch supporter of local indie talent also. Anna appeared in the ABC show The Recording Studio as the house engineer, and she also appeared in the hit doco Her Sound, Her Story. As well as the production and the technical stuff, Anna is also a songwriter, mentor, APRA AMCOS ambassador, and Anna generously shares her passion for music and audio production by providing insight and expertise to aspiring engineers. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Anna Laverty. I might kick it off. Okay, I think we're rolling. Anna Laverty, welcome to the Gig Life podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So what I've usually been asking these last few weeks for people is how things have been, well, what you were up to before sort of COVID hit, and what got taken out, what's still there.
Yeah. So just before it happened, because I know we saw it on the news and we knew that it was a thing and it was probably going to affect us in some way, but I didn't see it coming the way it has come. And I just remember being on a session on the 15th of March. He was freaking out because his wife was in New Zealand on tour and he was in Australia on tour, and they was supposed to be meeting up, but they were closing the borders to New Zealand that night at midnight. And so he was freaking out. And then I was like, this is a thing. Like we kind of need to worry about this a little bit. And then I remember end of the day, save back up on the drive home, because I don't live in Melbourne. I live an hour out of Melbourne. So on the drive home, I'm like, I don't think I'm going back into Melbourne for a while. I haven't been back since, And so basically I finished that project. Luckily that was our last day. So I finished that, just finished 2 albums. So I had a few other things lined up that just basically like on hold until we can get back in a studio.
Right.
And I got an album to mix from home, which was like a low budget thing, which I'm able to just do at home. But I don't know. It's just it's all very unknown, and we don't really know what's going to happen next, or even like, going into the studio with an artist and them feeling comfortable because they have to be comfortable. That's, it's the whole thing about being in a studio and making a record. They have to be comfortable. So we'll see how we go.
Have you found people have been coming to you because they're feeling creative now and they find that they've got that time now that they probably didn't have to make their record, or people not kind of thinking about
Not really, not yet. I think that is going to come, but I think at the moment, like the first month, everyone was like, oh, this is so great. Let's eat loads of takeaway and watch loads of Netflix. And then I think maybe the second month people were like, I'm bored, I'm going to write some songs. And then I'm thinking in the next few months I'm going to get a lot of those emails like, hey, I've just been working on this thing and I was wondering if you want to do it. Yeah.
That's cool.
Fingers crossed.
So do you have a setup at home to be able to mix from home?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, it's a very portable rig. It's kind of my rig that I take to hotel rooms and to people's bedrooms when I'm, whatever. But I am able to mix. I've got my cans. I've got my DT770s, and I've got a couple of pairs of cool speakers. So I can. It's just the room's not very. It's my spare room. It just doesn't sound very good. Yeah. Not to mention the baby knocking on the door.
Yeah, that's it.
What are you doing? Yeah.
I might ask you a bit later about some tech stuff too, because I kind of dig that sort of stuff. So okay, well, what we might do now is I want to roll it back to how it all began, and we'll sort of lead up through parts of your career and then see where we go from there. So you were born in the UK?
I was born in the UK. Yes, I lived there till I was 8. With my family, and then we emigrated to Perth in Western Australia.
Right. So was there music in the family? Instrument players and...
No instrument players and no technical people. My dad's an electrician and he absolutely loves music.
Yep.
And I think that those two things influenced me greatly. Yeah.
Okay. So were you getting to tinker around a little bit with electrical appliances and home hi-fi stuff early on?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, home hi-fi mostly. Also, I have this really strong memory of being in early high school, and I had 2 VCR players that were hooked up, and I was making this thing, and I remember taking one of the RCA cables out and having just being really creative with that.
Yep.
And that was pretty exciting for me. Lol. I'm a 90s kid. And then, and it just kind of went from there to making my own radio shows on my little hi-fi. And
cool.
if I jammed down the record and play button on this, I could have 3 channels bouncing down to one. And so, just stuff like that. And that's where my just love for that kind of stuff came from. And it's still the same feeling that I get now when I work on that stuff. That's the feeling that I got then.
Yeah, that's cool. Were you messing around trying to get different sounds out of things at that stage and trying to work out how you got those sounds?
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly what I was doing. I remember because I'm not an instrument player really, so I remember being in my bedroom and I had a classical guitar that I was learning how to play, but I just wasn't very good at it. I've since realised it's probably because no one ever told me to turn it upside down because I'm left-handed.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, so I would make noises with the guitar, not necessarily playing it, and then looping it and this is on a cassette deck, and looping it and then putting in almost samples from the radio, the top 40, and just being creative with that kind of stuff. I find really fun.
That's really cool. What kind of music were you into early days?
Early days, early high school, terrible pop music, but I was all in. I was Spice Girls, Hanson, loved it, absolutely loved it. And then, because I grew up in the suburbs in the north of Perth, and then when I became 14, 15, my big brother got the Unplugged in New York, the Nirvana album.
Yep.
And that kind of changed things for me a little bit.
That changed things. That changed things for a lot of people. That album, eh? Yep.
Yeah, I think so. And so that, and then just got into. My brother was also very into Metallica, but then I also had another brother next door in the other room listening to hip hop and stuff like that. So I was between these 2 bedrooms just taking it all in.
Yeah.
And then my dad's down the hallway listening to early Eagles and the Beatles and stuff like that. So really cool influences from all around.
Yep. So for people that don't know, Anna's a producer and a audio engineer. Now, when did you realise or get the inkling that you wanted to be a audio engineer?
Then when I was 14.
Yeah, right. Okay. So was there a moment? Did you hear something? Did you see somebody? Were you inspired by somebody at the time? Yep.
Sort of. So I like I say, I love music and I love the technical stuff. So I did drama in school, and I always remember, it coming up to like a production, and everyone had to, what do they call it? Like audition for a part.
Yep.
And I was like, oh God, I don't want to do that. And my teacher knew that I didn't want to do that. And she was like, well, do you want to do the lighting and the sound? And I was like, yes, I do. And she goes, cool, you could be the sound engineer. And I was like, is that what it's called? And so I knew that I wanted to be a sound engineer before I knew what it was called. Put it that way.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So was that the first time you'd ever sat at a soundboard? Was it kind of learning it on the fly, or did you have somebody there?
It was very much the first time I was on a board, but it would have been, it wasn't a huge theatre, so it would have just been, I reckon, probably mostly lighting, and then probably sound effects cues. So like, just kind of triggering, the sound of breaking glass or something. But it was so exciting. And from that, I went and volunteered at a community theatre and did sound, and I learnt from a guy there about sound, and that was so exciting to me.
Yeah, that's cool. Did you start jumping into doing sound for bands that were in town, gigs and that kind of stuff, or did it sort of start?
Look, not really. I was so young. I mean, this is I'm still 15, 16 at this time.
Yep.
And then so, I get my parents to go and drop me off at a community theatre to do that kind of stuff. But then when I was 17, I went to WAPA, which is the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts, and I did sound. And that was when I joined the West Australian music industry scene. And it was so cool. There were so many great bands around at that time. And, the Panics, Sleepy Jackson, early Carnival, such a great scene. And I definitely volunteered to carry a lot of gear, and I had a lot of support from all the promoters. Like all the guys that were booking the venues were just really into this young person hanging around, like trying to learn all the stuff. And I had some really great mentors. And, I did that sound course for 3 years, and I graduated when I was 19. And 2 weeks later I moved to London.
Right. So just back to the course then, the audio course. What did you find the most difficult part of that?
Of the course?
Of the course.
I'm not very academic, so like all the classes about sound, all the classes about lighting, all the classes about history of art, history of theatre, I just absolutely aced and love so much. But and even we did electronics classes and stuff like that, and I love those. But I'm just that whole it was a university, and it was like I'm not very academic, so I guess I struggled a little bit with that, but whatever, I passed. I graduated.
That's it. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so you moved to London, so how did that come about?
Yeah, so I was managing a Perth band at the time, just because I knew the people, I knew all the people, I knew all the bookers, I knew all the other managers and stuff like that. And the band were really cool, and we were doing really well, and we were just gagging to get out of Perth, basically, all of us. And so we just made a pact that we were going to go, and we jumped on a plane 2 weeks after uni. I had $500. I always remember that. I thought it was loads of money. And I got there, and we moved into a high-rise hostel in Stockwell, which was like bunk beds with a shared bathroom down the hall, and we stayed there for 2 weeks, and we were like, cool, we got 2 weeks to get jobs, otherwise we're going to run out of money.
Yeah.
And
right.
I got a job in a record store.
That's cool. That was your husband's band, right?
Well, he wasn't my husband at the time.
Yeah.
We were kids. We were kids. But yeah, he was the singer, and then there was his sister was the guitarist, and my best friend was the bass player, and then another good buddy was in the band as well.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, that would have been cool to go over there with at least knowing everyone that well, because
we were such a cool gang. It was great. Yeah.
All right. So when did you start getting? Because I read that you started getting into a bit of like band promotion and putting on shows over there and that kind of stuff. So how did that sort of come about originally?
Yeah, I'm the kind of person who I just sort of do stuff. I've realized that with age that not everyone is like that.
Yep.
So, I'm 19. I'm in London with a bunch of my buddies and I just want to go and see bands all the time. So I'm like, cool, well, I'm just going to put on shows. I'm just going to put on our own shows so our friends' bands can come and play. Because Paul worked at a record store as well. And we knew all the people in all the cool indie bands in London. So we just were like, cool, do you want to come play this show? Do you want to come play this show? I remember we charged £2 on the door. It was in this basement club called Push, which is gone now. They knocked it down to build the underground. But so we were doing this and that was a club night called Hooked Up. And I was also running this other night with a guy called Will, 5 nights a week. And I remember, like, looking back on it now, we booked like Jonah's Policewoman, we booked Greg Dolly, we booked all these incredible artists, Paolo Nutini, before they were who they are now. Like Paolo Nutini was 16 when he came and played our show. And we did that 5 nights a week, every single week. And you could smoke down there in this basement. And I just always remember it was like a cloud, just going into this cloud land.
I kind of miss those days, to be honest. I don't, but I do,
Yeah, same. I mean, how bad for us was it? But it was fun. And then from that, I was seeing so many amazing bands and I was like, I've got to start a record label. There's so many great bands. So I started this record label called Hooked Up Records and putting out all these 7 inches. And then, I was like, fuck, well, how are we going to record all these bands to put out their records? I was like, well, I'll just go down to the rehearsal room and record them. So cool. I was doing that. So I was like recording them and then pressing them and then selling them and promoting them and managing them and all this kind of stuff. And it was pretty crazy, but it was like so fun.
Yeah.
No regrets at all. It was so great. Awesome. I was always skint, always, but I didn't care.
Yeah, you're smiling. Good stuff.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. So how do you start a record label? How do you just start a record label?
Well, I didn't know when I started. I just like paid someone to press a bunch of 7 inches and paid someone to do the artwork and then like took it to shows. And then eventually I got this really great distribution deal and started taking some of the bands on tour to like Europe. It's just insane. I mean, I'm 20 at this time. And I remember we were hanging out with Robin Proper Shepherd from a band called Sophia, who used to be called the God Machine. And we got to know him really well. And
the God Machine.
The God, yeah. And then I remember one day I said, oh, hey man, are you going to come to my birthday? And he goes, yeah, sure. Well, how old are you? And I was like, I'm 21. He goes, oh my God, never tell anybody your age. Because he just didn't think I was going to be taken seriously.
Oh, right. Okay.
And he's probably right. But, it was good fun. I was just having the time of my life with all my best mates,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did the move into the studios start?
Yeah. So it was like I'd been there for a bit and I sort of was like, I really miss being in the recording studio. Like it's super fun doing DIY recording and all that kind of thing, but I want to be where the Neves are at, So
okay. So let's roll back a little bit then. So you're saying you wanted to get back into the recording studio. Is that from the experience that you had back at the course? Or did you
uni? Uni.
Okay,
and because
you hadn't been in the studios at that stage.
No, except for the fact that I'd done work experience. So every single uni holidays, every single high school holidays, I had done work experience.
Yep.
And, the in Perth, the options were not huge, but there was a couple of recording studios. But then I was also in like radio stations and I was in like, I just went anywhere where there was a sound desk.
Okay.
And so I really wanted to go and work with some Neves and some Neumanns and some beautiful gear. So I sent out some, I'm pretty sure we were doing email then, sent out some emails to some studios, and, no one ever wrote back except for when one studio did write back and said, we have a 2-week work experience program. Everyone does the same thing. They come in, they learn from the previous person. They teach them what to do. You're there for 2 weeks. You do that every day for 2 weeks, and then you teach the next person. And it's like a position that we have in our organisation. So this was at Moloko Studios. They had like 12 studios all over London that they managed, and they would like send assistants out to studios. And my job was washing tea towels, changing tea bags and sugar, and running hard drives around all the studios on the bus, basically.
Right.
So I did that.
That classic studio runner stuff.
It was classic runner. And I'm so glad I got to do it, because it was like, I got to go around all the studios. So I'd like walk into a session and, like, they'd be doing this record, and then I'd go to the next session and the Rolling Stones would be doing a session. Then I'd go to the next, it was like that insane.
Yeah.
And then on my second last day of work experience, I remember cleaning a light switch, and Nick Young, who runs the studio, came in and said, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I'm just cleaning this light switch." And he's like, "Come with me, I'll find something better for you to do." And I went in the studio and he introduced me to Ben Hillier, and that was the first time I'd actually been in one of the studios, and while they were sort of working. And Ben was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to America in 2 days to do the Depeche Mode record. Can you help me rack up my entire studio and do an inventory so that when I come back, I know that if I've forgotten anything?" Yeah, so we hung out for 2 days, me, Ben, and Ferg, his engineer, packed up the studio. And at the end of that, he said, "Well, I'm going to be gone for 6 weeks. I'd really love to have you in here. I can pay you £6 an hour. I want you here every day, being the assistant to the other people who come in. Just so," he's like, "I can see that you know how to hold microphones, and I just don't want any of my stuff to get broken."
Yeah.
And so that was my first job in a studio, and I didn't leave that studio. I loved it. It was the pool, and he shared it with Paul Epworth, and so I started assisting those guys.
That's interesting. I liked how you held the microphone. I get that,
Yeah.
When you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars worth of microphone.
Yeah.
And someone's flinging it around and dropping it in the box and that kind of thing. Far out.
Oh, totally, man. Because he was just like, I'm shitting my pants. I've never held anything that expensive before. So I'm really careful with it, And also I just honor these beautiful microphones that he had. And that's nice, And I always remember, like, because this is what I say to young people who want to be like engineers or whatever. I always say to them, Nick Young, who runs the studio, has said to me since, because we still chat, we're still friends, and he said to me, "I never would have asked you to come in the studio and help Ben if you hadn't been cleaning the light switch." He's like, "If you were sitting there on your laptop, like doing something, I wouldn't have asked you." And I'm like, "Well, I couldn't afford a laptop. I didn't even have one." So everything happens for a reason.
That's it. It's that classic. You got to literally start from the bottom and know how to do those roles all the way up. In my trade, I'm an electrical fitter by trade. We get a lot of apprentices come through, and you can, some of them don't understand why they're cleaning those parts or sweeping they want to get straight on the bench and pull stuff down. They don't get it,
Yeah, no, there's a process.
Totally.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So you've packed up the studio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what happens
half the gear's gone.
Yep.
So half the gear's gone, and then I spent a couple of weeks like assisting other producers who were coming in who'd never worked in the studio before. So I was showing them like the routing and everything.
Yep.
And just helping out on sessions, and that was cool. And then Paul Epworth came in, and we started doing an album for a guy called Jack Peñate. And that was probably one of my first like full albums that I assisted. So I got to see the whole process from the start to the finish. So that was really cool. And then Ben came back, and I did, for starters, we mixed the Depeche Mode record that he'd been doing, and then did a bunch of other records with him. And then I did a Florence and the Machine album with Paul Epworth. And I just worked there and like doing, 16-hour days, 7 days a week for a few years,
Right.
basically. And so I was in London overall for like 5.5, 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then Paul was like, I really need some sun. I mean, he's Scottish, but he's also an immigrant to Australia, and he was like, let's go back to Australia for a while, see what we're doing. Because I mean, when you're that young, being away from your family, they suddenly start going like, are you ever coming back? Like,
yeah, right.
we thought you were going to London for like 6 months. Like, you've been there for 6 years. When are you coming back?
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, right. And I didn't want to come back. I had my dream job. But I said to Paul, if I'm working at Sing Sing in Melbourne, because it's the only studio I'd heard of, I was like, if I'm working at Sing Sing in a year, I'll be happy. But if I'm not, I'm coming back here. And the studio said they'd hold my job. And so I came back I moved to Melbourne. I'd never even really been to Melbourne. I'd been there once and on holiday. And I got here and I wasn't employed, but I was working as an assistant at Sing Sing 3 weeks later.
Right. So how did you get there?
Yeah.
Persistence. You just knock on their door and...
This is a weird story, and like I would, if you don't believe me, that's fine. But I came back and I obviously emailed them and said I'm coming, and they were like, look, we don't employ anyone, but come by and we'll meet you and we'll just have a chat. Mm-hmm. So I went in, I met Kai and Jude. They're just the best people in the world. And they were like, it's great to meet you. You're welcome to come and use the studio whenever you want, but we to hire it, but we just don't employ anyone. So I was like, great, all good, no worries, see you later. And then I think like a week or two later, I get this phone call or email from Jude saying, you will never believe this, but one of our all-time favorite assistants has moved to London and just got your job. And we think it would be fair, to give you his job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right. So when you went and talked to them, you would have told them that you had that job at that studio in London. Right.
So then they'd obviously heard from Russell, who was the guy Russell Faulkner is the guy who went there, and he was like, yeah, I got this job working at this studio, and they're all going on about this girl called Anna who has apparently moved back to Melbourne, so you should keep an eye out for her. They're saying that she's really great. And then unbeknownst to me, another guy that I'd been working with in London had used to work at Sing Sing, and he emailed them and said, there's this person coming back to Australia, you should employ her because she's really great. And so all these guys that I had worked with went out of their way to hook me up, and that's pretty cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So how long were you there at Sing Sing?
So then I had to go back to the start after I'd been sort of engineering and doing all these really cool things in London, but I didn't know anyone, and that's what it's all about. So I went back to assisting, and I assisted at Sing Sing for over 5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you say you didn't know when you say you didn't know anyone, so you're saying that to be in that engineer's jobs, you're having to get to know artists and bands and stuff.
Yep.
And kind of work the room type sort of thing, so they know to come to you. So you don't have a seat at a studio and a person comes in and says they want to record the record here.
No, I mean walk in traffic to a studio is just doesn't really happen. I mean, I suppose it does kind of, and you do get a few of those engineering gigs, but the production gigs, the good gigs, the ones that you want and the ones that you have creative input on, all that comes from word of mouth. Yeah. Right. And always has, every job I get comes from someone who I did this thing with 10 years ago, and it's their cousin's band or whatever. That's where it always comes from.
Yeah, right. That's cool. So so did you have to start going back out listening to bands, watching bands, and starting to talk to people? And
yep, I had to get into the scene here, and So, you know, I basically just started going. I mean, I was still young. I was still only like 25. So I was going to, you know, the Tote all the time, the Evelyn, just all those indie band venues. I was in Brunswick, so I was going like a lot to the Retreat when it was kind of very different and stuff like that. And it was awesome. I loved it, and I got to know all these great bands. And of course, there's a huge WA contingency in Melbourne, so I kind of plugged into that scene because I knew a lot of those people from when I was in Perth.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was good. And once the ball started rolling, I guess I just, and I met so many people from assisting other producers and engineers at Sing Sing. Met so many people in the scene from that. So that was cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so who was the first artist or band that said we want Anna to engineer?
Well, I reckon. So I mean, I did loads and loads and loads and loads of assisting with Stephen Schramm and Adam Rhodes and everyone, all the guys that are doing it basically came through Sing Sing and I assisted them. And then I remember there was one session where everything kind of came together, like Stephen Schramm, who I assisted a lot at that time, and he said to me, I'm not going to book you anymore. You have to go out and find your own work. You are too good to be assisting. You need to go and find your own work. And I was like, okay. I was just really, I don't know what it was. I just had this block in my head where I couldn't make that leap. And then he was like, well, I'm not going to book you anymore. And he literally stopped booking me. and also at the same time, like I worked a session where the producer and like the producer engineer guy just sat on the couch at the back of the room for the entire session. And I ran the whole session. And at that point I was like, okay, I can definitely do this.
Right. So was it Rick Rubin? Because that's what he does, doesn't he?
No, I wish. No, definitely wasn't Rick Rubin.
Yeah, no. Because he's got that reputation.
Yeah.
Of just going in the room and sitting there and maybe not saying anything to anybody and laying on the couch and
I know. I do. I have heard that.
Then calling up or sending an email saying, yeah, that such and such, you should change that. And they do that, and it's a bloody hit record.
There's not many people that can get away with that, especially not in Australia.
Yeah.
So there was those things, and then the thing that really happened was so Stephen did book me for this one particular gig, and it was a Little Red album, and he at the same time, his partner gave birth to twins. And he had to be home by 8:00 every day. Like, I mean, she had twins, so she was home alone. Yep. She's, New Zealand, no family in Australia kind of thing. And so he was like, I'm leaving this studio at 7:00 every night. If you want to take over and engineer when I'm gone, you can, and I'll pay you an extra $100 a day. And I was like, dude, that's doubling my wage. So he would go home at 7, and from 7 till 2, 3 in the morning, I would engineer, and then we would come back at 10, and he would engineer till 7, and I would assist, and then I would take over from 7, and so that was that Little Red record, which actually ended up being released under the band name New Gods. Yeah.
Awesome, that's cool. Yeah. So in just a little bit of tech stuff. Were you just recording digital, or was there tape? Were you recording?
Oh yeah, no. There's tape. There's it depends what the project is, but I like tape. I use tape a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So you're starting to build a bit now. Did he give you some when he sort of pushed you out and told you to go out on your own? Did he sort of give you some contacts, or did he say no? Just
nah. He honestly, by that stage, kind of didn't need to. I already
okay.
I already knew everyone, but it was just that block I had in my brain that I had to take that leap of faith, and I did, and it worked. Yeah.
That's cool.
Mm.
That's really cool. So what year was that?
That would have been 2000 and oh my God, I don't know, 2012 or 13 maybe. Yeah.
So
2013.
how long was your time at Sing Sing?
Well, I mean, like I say, I was never employed by them, but I assisted there for like 5 years. So probably till 2014 or 15. And then, I mean, I still, like, I did a record there in March. So I still go back there and work, but that's me booking the studio out, you know, and getting my own assistant, which is so exciting.
Right, that's cool. So so just moving forward a little bit now, and we will come back. So that's how you do it, right? So you have a project, and then you have to you have to find a studio, and you have to book a studio, or just these days.
Yeah, it depends what it is. Like it all comes down to budget, really.
Sure.
I mean, and also it depends what project it is. So if I've got a full band that want to play live, like I just did a record for a band called Shepherd and Airplane, and I also, so that's two of the guys from the Peep Temple, and they're a 3-piece, and I just get them in the room playing really well and really vibey and set the whole scene and hit record, you know?
Yeah.
And I want to do that in a studio like Sing Sing because they've got a really good maintained tape machine, and they've got really good mics and really good desks.
All right, cool. So can I talk to you a little bit about some gear and your thoughts on like some processes and software and that kind of thing? Because I'm kind of a little bit, just being a home recorder.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference of like analog over digital?
Again, it depends what it is. Like, sometimes, like, I love the sound of tape, but it's super inconvenient. So, you know, everything takes twice as long or more than twice as long. So, if you've got the money and you've got the time, tape's great.
Yep.
But if you don't, and it's going to slow you down, or if you've got a certain artist who's like temperamental or not into waiting, then those things really matter, and you just have to kind of decide what's going to be better for that project. But generally, analog's my vibe.
Yeah, awesome. So what are your thoughts on some of the tape plugins?
Tape plugins? I love them.
The emulations. Yeah. And how sort of close do you think they get?
I don't know. I mean, I've never A/B'd them, but I always, whenever I mix anything in the box, there's always like a tape over the master bus, the mix bus.
Yep.
Yeah.
So so just on the mix bus then, so what's on your main template mix bus?
A few things. So I've got like God, I'm really not good with names. I've got one of the Slate digital things, like the mix rack.
Yep.
And I kind of just tweak it depending on the project. But then there's also the tape far out. Can't remember who makes.
Oh, you don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to worry about the names. It's all good.
Yeah, then there'll be a tape thing, and then the final thing that I always have on my chain is the Oxford inflator. I just think it opens up the whole mix. I love it. Actually, just before that, I've usually got that air plug-in, you know, the one where you can just turn up the air a little bit, and it like
that's a Slate thing too, isn't it? The Slate air with the dial.
It could be. It's silver. It's
the silver thing. Yeah.
So I sometimes just dial in that because I find once you've done all the crazy stuff that you've done with all the individual groups or the tracks or whatever, sometimes at the end you're just kind of missing a little bit of that like top end, you know, it all gets a bit dull.
Yeah.
That's
cool.
And I remember when they came out with that plugin, I was like, wow, I don't have to go back and individually turn up that frequency on every single group. How cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. It's almost like mastering.
Yeah. So have you got into mastering, or do you kind of see that as its own sort of art?
That's its own thing.
It's like its own science, really.
Yeah, its own science, but also like I mean, mastering engineers do great stuff to sonics and stuff as well, but I find a lot of the mastering stuff is like embedding all the codes and getting the fades right and putting all the the ISRC codes and all the names and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not really that into that kind of stuff.
Yeah, gotcha.
I kind of like printing the song and going, that's it. Someone else make them sound good together, you know?
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you have a favourite microphone?
For what?
Okay. That's a good question. Snare drum?
Yes, SM7B.
Okay. Kick drum?
Yes, a 47 FET.
Vocals?
Who's singing? I just think it makes it makes such a difference.
Yep.
And usually it's really funny, I'm one of those kind of weirdos where when a singer's talking to me before we've done the vocals, I'll be just looking at them funny. I'll just be looking at them funny and they're like, why are you looking at me funny? I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm just listening to your voice.
I'm working.
Yeah, and they're like, that's super creepy. Yeah. But so it just depends on who it is. But if I had a male singer coming into the studio, I would set up like, some kind of vintage Neumann microphone, 67 or a 47 or 49 or something like that. If I had a woman, depending on what the project was, again, like if it's jazz, I would choose something different. If it's pop, I would choose something different. It really depends.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I always laugh when you see like when I have interns or whatever, and they come in and they like take photos of the settings on the compressor, and it's like, it's not gonna work for you. Like that's not gonna work for you. You're just gonna have to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just on taking the photos of settings and stuff. The boards that you work on, are they like old sort of Neve type boards where you have to say for example you come into the studio on a Monday and you've done a session, but then you've got to come back the following Monday and a couple of other people have come in and used the board. Do you have to recall the settings, or are you using boards where you can sort of hit a button and it recalls?
It depends. Like if I was recording an album and I needed it to sound the same, there's no way that I would split it up.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Yeah. If for example we did an album and then an artist came back and said, I've written a new song, it's the hit, we need to go back in and re-emulate.
Right.
No, I mean I don't do recalls on boards for recording really, because it's the Neves and stuff that I use don't have total recall or anything like that. I often do recalls for mixes.
Okay.
When I'll do a mix, and because it's really difficult if I'm mixing on a board and you send it to an artist. Artists aren't used to these days having to say yes, that's the perfect mix, and I'm definitely not going to want to change it 3 days later, because what you do is you print the song. It's printed. That's the song. You can't change it, and then you go on and you do the next song. So the whole board changes. So they can't come back 2 days later and say they want to change it.
Right, gotcha.
Right?
Yep.
So, but if you're mixing something in the box, you just open the session and everything's the same.
Yep.
So and artists aren't used to the old way of doing things where you can't change it. And even if you do a recall, it never sounds the same.
Yeah, right.
Totally. So. Yeah, does that answer your question? I can't even remember what the question was.
It does. Yeah, just about the recall thing. Because I've heard stories like in the US and LA, there'd be sessions during the day and there'd be sessions at nighttime, and there'll be two separate bands, two separate producers on these big boards, and they'd have the board set for the day, and then the intern would have to come around and and basically draw a picture of the board, and every channel, everything, and then the next the next band will come in, do their thing, and in the morning.
You sort of can do that, but you sort of can do that, but I can almost guarantee you that what they're doing in that situation is like one session has channels 1 to 24, and the other session has channels 25 to 52 or whatever.
Oh, right, okay.
So you don't actually touch each other's strips, but the center section that you share, so you'd have to recall that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. What are your thoughts on these services like Lander and, those sort of instant mixing services where you send your track in and it, enter a couple of things and it sends you back a mix done from an algorithm?
Oh, look, whatever. I mean, if it sounds good, it sounds good. But it doesn't, like, use someone that has ears.
Yeah, I gotcha.
I mean, fuck, I don't know. And also, it just sounds totally gross to me.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, gotcha. Awesome.
Yeah.
When I was doing a little bit of home mixing and stuff, I got onto this thing called dueling mixers. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nah.
Right. So what it is, there's a couple of home mixer guys. They both have these YouTube channels where they do sort of home mixing stuff, and they've created this thing called dueling mixers. And what it is you join this community of, fellow home mixers. And at the start of every month, you get sent the stems for a song.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And the two guys that run it, they do their own mix of it. And so you kind of get that first. And then you mix the song yourself. And then you, if you're keen, you post it up to the board for people to kind of listen and analyze.
You'd never be able to do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, why's that?
I would never be able to do that because I don't need someone telling me all the shit I'm doing wrong. Like I just think, I don't know, that's giving me anxiety just thinking about doing that. It's like, I think because I don't know. I don't really want to say this because I'm not super into the whole, like, anything being about gender, but that's super bro culture to me, and I just think I would walk in and people would just hate me being there.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I don't know. I just find it very it's not my world.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and also, like, I have to say, recording and mixing is my job. It's what I do all the time, and so if I have time off, I don't want to spend it doing a mix for fun. Like, that might sound bad.
No,
that might sound bad, but I really just want to, like, hang out with my family and
gotcha.
Maybe listen to music for fun.
Okay, gotcha. Fair answer. Yeah, I guess I asked that because maybe sort of coming up when you're kind of learning the stuff, maybe that was something you may have gotten into.
Oh, no, I didn't. And you know what and why? Because when I was learning how to mix, like, I'm not that old, but it's changed so quickly that when I was learning how to mix, we didn't all have Pro Tools in our bedroom.
Okay.
At all. Like, it was, I learned to mix under someone, like the super traditional way. So you'd go into a studio and sit there for 25 hours watching the back of someone's head while they mixed. That's how I learned how to mix.
Gotcha.
And so I guess it's the same thing. It's the same concept, but I just did it like one-on-one. Mm-hmm. As opposed to in a community where people would judge me.
It does get pretty harsh in there, but like, it also gets that stuff doesn't bother me because I can but if someone did criticize, I'd ask them why, and I'd get them to try and prove to me why it was wrong, and then get me to show me their thing, but they never would, so it's kind of I guess it is a bit of a place for trolls, eh? I never really thought of it like that because I don't tend to think about that too much. Yeah,
I don't like to put myself out there in like a vulnerable situation because I'm really bad with confrontation.
Okay.
You know, and I'd probably just like cry. I'm actually making myself sound really pathetic right now.
No,
but,
not at all. Not at all.
It's just not my way of doing it at all. I'd rather hang out with someone and like we could sit there, like me and you in a room, like going, is that how you do that? That's really cool. This is how I do it. But like on the internet, no thanks.
Fair enough.
Not unless I can storm out. I don't want to do it.
No, good answer. Good answer. Now, you know, like a vocalist will practice working on their vocal pitch, and a guitarist will practice scales and that kind of thing. With mixing and sound and stuff, do you need to train your ears to different frequencies if you're kind of away from? Does that question make sense?
Like oral training?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just like, because if you're, you know, you're sitting at the desk and you're listening to a mix or something.
Yeah.
Can you hear 2K or can you hear?
No, I can, but I don't know what it's called. So, but I know where it is on the scale. So I'm pretty quick at just grabbing it. Like I can, if I've got like a line with dots on it, I know where to grab. Or if I've got like one of those EQs with lots of, you know what I can't remember what they're called right now, but those EQs with loads of little
notches or whatever
things on. Then I know where it is, but I'm not great at knowing what it's called. I mean, I remember at uni learning 20 to 20K, and I'm like, somewhere between those two frequencies.
Because there's some people that can just call it, you know.
And I do, and again, it's actually similar to what you were just saying about like dueling mixes. Like I don't know. Like I feel like they're sitting there like training themselves how to like what frequency it is, and I'm just like, it's there. Like if this is my scale, it's there, you know, or it's there. Like I see mixes. I don't necessarily I can't put it into words.
I understand what you're saying.
And I'm actually, I think that's just how my brain is, because I'm not even like with song names, I will know as soon as I hear the first note of a song come on what song it is. I could sing every thank you. I could sing every single lyric, but I don't know the name of the song.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I have a weird brain.
No, that's cool. That's cool. All right. Well, let's talk about some of the stuff you do outside your work and things like mentoring and that kind of stuff. So, and when did you start getting into that? And tell us a little bit about some of the organisations that you do that stuff for. And
so I mentor for. I guess I got into it because people just started asking me to. And I think the reason why I did so much of it was because a lot of the organizations like Girls Rock and like Desert Divas and Sister Sounds and stuff like that, I'm a girl. And these were girls, they were girls like programs. So working with youth who, you know, I've done some stuff like in youth justice and in high school. So going into girls' schools and teaching production and stuff like that through APRA AMCOS.
Because you're an ambassador for
APRA
AMCOS.
I'm an ambassador. So I just kind of go around and teach people about that. But so a lot of the mentoring I've done, I think a lot of it was me being involved from the start was because there's so few women that I got asked a lot. Fortunately now, a lot of those people that I mentored have been doing it for a little while, and now they're mentoring too. So it's growing, you know, which is so good.
first time I heard of you is I watched the Her Sound, Her Story movie.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
That's great. That was really cool. So tell us a little bit about how that came about and how you approached and a little bit about it.
Yeah.
I'll definitely put some links in the show notes to that kind of stuff. And
yeah. So you got to understand that documentary, Her Sound, Her Story, went off. Like it just became huge.
Yep.
And at the time, like when they asked me to do it, we had no idea that it was going to be that big at all. So I just got like an email and it was like, hey, my name's Claudia. I'm doing this documentary about like women in music and, you know, you're a woman in music. Can we come and interview you? And I was like, yeah, sure. You know, I said, I'll be at the studio on this day. If you want to come down before, it'll be a cool backdrop kind of thing.
Yep.
And they come down, two gorgeous girls, Michelle and Claudia, and they come in and they're just interviewing me. And I was just like, yeah, you know, this and that and breastfeeding and babies and being in the studio and all this stuff. And then I found out like all these other huge artists were doing this show. So, you know, just everyone, Tina Arena bearing her soul and her anger and just so many people. And then they cut it together and invited us all to a preview. And I don't think anyone in the house was not crying. It felt like a movement. And ever since then, I have been in touch with so many of the artists and I think we have a really similar experience, really.
Right.
So it was just incredible. It's been a movement, really.
Yeah, that's,
you know, and it came about at the right time. I mean, they obviously didn't plan it, but it came out at the same time of the Me Too movement. So,
right, okay,
amazing.
yeah, it's really cool. People go check that out. It's a really, really, really good eye-opening movie and something I think everybody should watch.
Yep. For sure, especially anyone working in Australian music. I mean, you'll really see how some people, Kylie Minogue, you know, Lindy Morrison, all the people who were doing it back then were pitted against each other instead of encouraged to be supportive of each other.
Yeah.
And just the culture has changed so much in the last 5 years that it's unrecognizable now.
That's really cool.
And isn't that awesome? Like how much cool art are we going to have from that?
That's excellent. Over these last couple of weeks, I've been listening to your Spotify show reel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And
cool.
What one thing I really dig out of this podcast is I get to hear a lot of new music.
Yeah.
And
cool.
Listening to your playlist, which I'll link in the show notes of this too, so go and check it out. You know, I was introduced to artists like Ruby Boots and excuse me, and Go Get Mum. Man,
oh yeah, they're cool.
They're so cool. I love that album. It was so really So and the other one was Kaitlin Keegan, and you guys have just released a new song.
Yeah, like literally 2 days ago, a song came out that we wrote and together, and I produced and mixed. It's a beautiful song, actually.
It is.
She's amazing.
Mm.
Yeah.
So songwriting. So when did you start songwriting? And you also said you weren't much of an instrument player. So
no, I'm not. And it's funny because, you know, I used to songwrite when I was in high school. I feel like everyone songwrote when they were in high school. But and then I just got busy and I just never really did it very much. And then in the last, I don't know, few years. In fact, when I was doing the songmaker stuff for APRA, so I would travel around a lot with a songwriter, and so we would go in as a team, songwriter, producer, and we were in hotels. So I was like on tour essentially for like 3 months of the year for 4 years, and I was in the hotel a lot, you know, with recording gear and with instruments.
Yep.
And so generally we would write songs, and so I got really inspired then again. And then I've always over the years contributed, because when you're in the studio producing, you do contribute to songwriting. So it's always been something I've done. But I guess I've made more of an effort to do it lately, and I've been really enjoying it. And especially during this lockdown, like I've had time that I haven't had in years to just sit down in my room and write. And I feel like a teenager again. Like,
Cool.
How exciting is that?
That's really cool.
Mm.
Just going back to the producer thing, when did you decide, or how did it come about to go from being the audio engineer to the producer?
Great question.
When you are producing, are you engineering? Are you engineering as well?
Yeah, in Australia there really isn't the budget to have those two people, which is a shame. We did have that when I was working in London, but not here. So I'm always doing both, but it took me forever to call myself a producer. It took me forever, and I find it so laughable now, because people graduate from like a 1-year college course in music production and call themselves a producer now. And like, it literally took me, like, I went to uni for 3 years and I was an assistant for 10 years. And then I was like, and then I was engineering, and then I was like, all right, you know what? I feel like I've produced a lot of records. And so that's when I started. And in fact, I think I only started calling myself a producer when I got a manager and she started writing it down.
When it shows up on the card.
Yeah, exactly.
Or in the email signature. Yeah. So what define the role of a producer in, I was going to say 2020, but that's 2020 pre-COVID. What's define the role of a producer these days?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, there's so many different types of producers now. Like, you can have a producer who makes beats, and that's a producer, but it's absolutely so different to what I do. I'm a producer in the traditional sense. So, I oversee and manage the creative goals of a song or an album or whatever, and I budget it and I time manage it, and then I use all of my like creative experience to finish and deliver a project on time and on budget.
Right. So it's like it's like the classic producer, but you're actually doing the work as well. You're doing the mixing and it's
really similar to the director of a film.
Right.
The role is very similar to that for a project. But then also, like, so the way I differentiate between producer and engineer is in charge of all the technical stuff, and the producer's in charge of all the creative stuff.
Right.
Yeah, and of course there's blurred lines, but that's for me essentially the difference.
Right.
And then a mixer is both creative and technical.
Right. Gotcha. What do you enjoy the most, the engineering or the producing?
Both. I enjoy them both
cool.
for different reasons. I love engineering, absolutely love engineering. That's what I always thought I wanted to be, an engineer forever. And then I ended up doing a bunch of production. I was like, well, I'm just the producer engineer,
Right.
So, and now I really enjoy the production because you get to be like super creative and kind of like impose your creative ideas on projects.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so when this COVID thing dies down, and well, just before I say it dies down, do you have some plans in the next sort of few months to start, restarting some projects?
I hope so. I really hope so. Like,
I know we talked about that right at the start, but I'm kind of what I'm leading up to here is
I mean, I've got a couple of albums lined up to go in and record, and everyone's ready, and we're just waiting until not until we're allowed, but until everyone feels good about it.
Like you said, feel comfortable and
Yeah. So that's happening. But then at the moment I'm doing a lot of like for example, this week I'm one of the judges for the Wham Song of the Year. So I'm just going through a bunch of songs and
Oh, cool.
judging them, which is terrible, but, just sort of coming up with some standout songs.
Right. So what's your judging criteria then? Don't know. You're shaking your head.
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends. I mean, there's a few main things that you base it on, like, like melody, lyrics, structure, stuff like that. Right. Performance, I guess. Yeah, it's really hard to judge music, isn't it?
Yeah, sure is. I was going to ask you before. I'll ask you now. On a session, have you had something go terribly wrong? I asked that because I was watching the recording studio the other day.
That was set up.
I thought it might be because you're very calm and relaxed and.
Look, it wasn't a setup, but what happened was they got like 2 seconds in and I went, hey guys, sorry, I've lost the mic.
Yeah.
And they edited it. I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about the church family.
Yeah, when the vintage Neumann mic.
Yeah.
Didn't work. Yeah.
So that it sort of didn't really happen like that. And I remember when they showed it on air and my dad rang me and he's like, that didn't happen, did it? And I was like, nah. And he goes, I knew that you wouldn't let that happen.
Yeah, because that kind of preempted my question after seeing that. And I did think when I was watching that, you were very like, whatever.
Sorry,
like,
we just lost the best take.
That magic you had in the room. Sorry. We didn't get it. So so that kind of preempted that question was, have you had like something in real life happen like that?
Yes, I have. There's, of course, there's been a few, but one session that I was super duper nervous on was the Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds one because I'm such a huge fan and they're just quite intimidating. Well, you think they're going to be intimidating, but actually they're amazingly lovely and all that kind of stuff. But me and Nick Launay were sitting in the control room and the band were doing one of those sessions where they were writing as they were recording. So they were like, just hit record and we're just going to jam on this thing for however long it takes.
Yep.
So that Nick Launay's telling me all of his amazing rock and roll stories, and we're sitting there and then I'm looking at the computer and as I'm looking at it, it stops recording. And I immediately hit record again. So we miss like half a second. But we missed half a second of Nick Cave in the Bad Seeds song. And Nick Launay was like, what just happened? And I was like, it stopped recording. It stopped recording. And he's like, thank God you were here. And I was like, oh my God. Just panicking. But because it was such like a, that album Push the Sky Away is very like, everything's very like, kind of like a mantra. So he was able to like just chop, paste, over the bit that isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when it stopped, was it one of those cases we were just talking about before about the length of the recording? Was it that?
Literally. So someone who had been in on this at the studio before ours had set a preference in Pro Tools to stop recording after like 40 minutes or something. And no one ever changes that preference. Why would you? It's such a shit thing to do. But have you found out who it was? Nah, man. No one would own up to that. And that's so interesting because the first thing I ever got taught at uni, and I've never forgotten it, and I learned it on my first day, was never assume. Yeah. Never, ever assume that box hasn't been ticked, So, you learn.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I contacted you today and I've asked you to choose a song, right? So the reason I've done that is I've got a new segment on the show where you choose one song and you said you were going to struggle choosing one.
It's insane.
Yeah, but you had to, and that's the rules. So you did it. So well done.
I was like, I just can't overthink this. I mean, I have a list on my phone of perfect songs, right?
Oh, right. Okay.
That like when I hear a song, I'll be like, yeah, that's going on the list. And I didn't choose one of those songs. I chose this song.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to cue it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to start playing it. You just let me know if you can hear this. Can you hear it? Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, Anna, can you tell us what the song is and explain why this is the song and what it means to you? Yep.
Look, you said choose a song that greatly influenced you or means the most to you. And that's too hard. So I just chose a song that influenced my work a lot.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's called The Dark Is Rising by a band called Mercury Rev. There it is. Yeah. So I chose it because I think I had a moment of clarity on a night bus in London once to this song. So I had like my first iPod, which I got for my 21st, and this song came on, and it is so incredibly well produced and recorded that it would bring a grown man to tears.
Right.
I reckon.
I never dreamed I'd hurt you. I never dreamed I'd lose you. In my dreams I'm always strong. And now the
what a beautiful voice,
is rising.
He's amazing. He's such an incredible showman.
And all my bridges burned. I always dreamed of big crowds, plumes of smoke and high.
So do you use this as a, like, do you have, you were just talking before about the list of songs that you've got. Do you have like a list of reference tracks when you're going in and doing a mix or something?
Yeah, so the song I have an album that I put on, and I've always put this album on, and it's Graceland by Paul Simon. And I was actually going to choose one of those songs for this exercise, but I just thought no, because that's the whole album. I need the whole album to make that point.
Right.
That is just one song that will do it for me.
Very cool. So that is The Dark Is Rising by and the album is All Is Dream.
Yeah,
Mercury
Rev. Yeah, it's produced by Dave Fridman, and that string arrangement is actually by Tony Visconti.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, you know, Bowie's longtime collaborator, producer. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So that song I've added to the Gig Life podcast.
Yes, I did not produce it. I wish. Yeah.
All good. Anna Laverty, thanks so much for spending this Sunday evening with me tonight and talking about your career and your life and stuff. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And hopefully we can meet sometime when you're in Sydney or if I'm in Melbourne. I've never actually been to Melbourne, ever.
Get out of town. You got to come to Melbourne, man. It's one of the greatest music cities in the world.
Yeah, these last 6 weeks I've spoken to a lot of Melbourne people on the podcast and I had that conscious decision to do that. And, I do need to, when they open the borders.
For sure. I mean, you know, when I get back in the studio and when they open the borders, you should come down and check out some of the great studios down here.
That would be great.
Yeah.
I'd enjoy that.
Cool.
All right, Anna, take it easy. And
thanks for having me.
Sweet as. Talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
All right, catch ya. See ya.
negative jerk, but I don't think that Trevor is good for you, Carol. I don't wanna be so sanctimonious, I don't wanna be such a negative prick. I just want you to let me hold your heart, Carol. And I don't think Trevor is good for you. I don't wanna be a fucking Christmas ham. I just want you to love me like I love you, Carol. And I don't think Trevor is good for you. I don't think Trevor is good for you. I don't think Trevor is good for you, Carol. When it's been on my brain, so fuck it. Carol, you're my spade, I'm your bucket. I don't wanna be so sanctimonious, I don't wanna be such a negative jerk, but I'm the one who's been helping you through the divorce.